live code. Today we'll be doing another beginner JavaScript tutorial, and what we'll be doing is making a memory game. So basically our game will have a set of cards, and you have to match between two cards that will have the same number. As usual, this will be using pure JavaScript, no HTML, no CSS. We'll be adding everything to the DOM just using JavaScript. Again, if you're not familiar with manipulating the DOM, then I recommend you learn a little bit about that, though it's not so complicated. So let's get started, and the first thing that we're going to need for this game is to have cards. Okay, so let's quickly create some cards. So let's start with one. So this card will be document.createElement, and we're just going to make a div. And this card is also going to have a number. So we're going to create another element that is going to be, we'll just make it an H1. And this is basically going to be the number that's going to be in the card. And now what we want to do is style these things up a bit. So for the card, let's just give it a background color of green. And basically the way that we're going to be flipping these cards around is basically only by changing the background color. And we'll give it a border. So that'll just be solid. So this is all styling that could also technically be done in CSS, but since we're doing a strict JavaScript tutorial, and it's good practice for learning how to manipulate the DOM and whatnot. So let's give it a height and a width. And dot width also 100 pixels. We'll just make it a square. And now what we need to do is basically append the number to the card. So let's just do card dot append child. Sorry, no dot there. And this will be number, and document dot body dot append child. And this is basically what's putting the card in the body of our HTML. And now we should see a card when we run. Okay, so we created our first card. You see green background, simple solid border. But we don't see our number. So let's, we want to give this number some inner HTML. So number dot inner HTML, and just for the beginning, we'll just call it, we'll make it inner HTML 1, just so we could see our number pop up here. And now let's give it a little styling, just so that it's kind of, you know, in the center of our card. So for that, we'll give the card align text, text align, and we'll just set that to center. Excellent. And now our one is more towards the middle. We could style it up a bit more, but just for the sake of time and simplicity, that's good enough for us. One more thing that I want to do is I want to give the number a color of green. Okay, and we'll see why that is in a second. So let's put that here with our number styling. Dot color equals green. Okay, And now let's run it again, and we don't see the 1, it disappeared, but it's actually there. It's just the same color as the card. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add an event listener to our card. And it's going to be an event listener for click. And when we click, we're going to run a function that is going to change the background color of the card. So style dot background color equals white. Okay, and now let's see what happens when we run this code. Okay, green, click, white. Okay, so that's basically the flipping of the card, and then we reveal that there is a 1 under the card. So now what we have to do is we have to make more than 1 card. So to start with, we'll just make a game of 6 cards. So first of all, let's declare a game size variable. And that way, if we decide to change up our game at any point, we can do that easily just from here up top. And what we're going to do is we are basically going to create a for loop. And this for loop is going to create a card until we get to the game size. And basically, it'll use the same code in here. So let's do it, and you'll see what I mean. So I equals 0, and then as long as I is smaller than game size, and let's put that all here. And now let's run our code. Boom. Okay, so you see we have 6 cards now. Basically, this code that's inside here is running 6 times. And we see that they're all kind of lined up one after the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another element. And it's going to be called the board, just a place for the cards to sit. And this is also going to be a div. And I'm going to give it some flex properties so that our, let's see, and then we want board.style.flex, and this, board.style.display, flex is in the display, and we're going to do flex. And then for the flex itself, we're going to add a flex wrap, and it's going to be wrap. Okay, so basically what this should do is change the cards so that they're not, so we have to, first of all, we have to attach this to the body. And now, instead of attaching our cards to our body, we are actually going to append them to board. Okay, so let's try that out, and great. Okay, so now we have the cards kind of side by side, and you see if we change our window size, this will change around as well. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good for now. And let's just add a little bit of a margin between the cards, just for aesthetic purposes, and we'll just make that 5 pixels. Amazing. Okay, so now we have spread out cards, and we click them. So now our problem is that all of our cards are the number 1. Okay, and basically we want to create a matching game. That means we should have several numbers here, and we should have 2 of each number. So the way we're going to need to do this is by using random numbers and by using an array. So let's declare an array up here, and we'll just call it game array, and it'll be an empty array. And now what we want to do is after creating our board, let's basically populate this array with numbers up to game size, and they should be pairs of numbers, and they should be random, in a random order. So let's create a for loop, and so let I equal 0, and this is going to be running for as long as game array is smaller than game size, okay? Because we're going to be adding numbers onto game array, and then when game array gets the game size, then we're done. And I++, okay? Excellent. So what we want to do here is basically get a random number to start with. So let's let random number, okay, and this is pretty standard when getting random numbers, that we use math.floor and math.random because we want whole numbers, and math.random basically gives a number between 0 and 1, okay, and so that means that there will be a decimal. And by doing math.floor, it basically means that we're going to be rounding down those numbers. And we also want to multiply math.random by the largest number, basically, that we want to be able to get here. And then we're going to be adding 1 to math.floor. So how do we decide what the highest number we want for the math.random? So basically we're going to use game size, so that way it's still flexible, and it's just going to be game size divided by 2, okay? Because let's say we have 6 cards here, we're basically going to want the highest number to be 3, okay? So let's do game size divided by 2, and let's console random number, because I just want to show this to you. I want to show you what we're getting here so that you understand the rest of what's going on. So let's run that. Console, okay, console.log, my bad. Amazing. So we're not getting anything. Oh, okay, there we go. Took some time, but it popped up. Okay, so we have a little bit of a problem because we haven't really told it to populate game array yet. So for now, I'm going to actually change this to I, okay, just for the time being, so that this loop is not a infinite loop. Still giving us lots of... so I'm also going to save our code, so let's just call this the memory game. Yeah, whenever you hit an infinite loop, that's scary, and you want to make sure that you're saving whatever's going on here. Luckily, the code saved, even though I sent the console into an infinite loop, which was not very good. But we're back, and what I want to show you is that here in the console, you can see that I'm logging the random numbers that we're getting, and they're all between 0 and 2. Because basically the math floor is rounding down. So basically what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to add 1 after everything. And then we'll be getting numbers between 1 and 3, which is exactly what we want in this case, where we have 6 cards. So let's get back to what we were doing. So basically each time we go through this for loop, we are going to want to add our random number to the array. But first we're going to want to check if this number already exists in the array, because if this number is already in the array twice, that means we have 2 cards with that number, and that means we don't want to add any more in. So if you want to check if there's 1 number in an array, you can use include. But since we want to check to see if there's 2, we're actually going to use a filter. So let's just declare a filter here, and we'll just call it something boring like array filter. And basically what we're going to do here is filter game array, and we're going to see if we're going to include, in this filter we're going to include numbers that equal to random number. Okay, and what filter basically does is it creates a completely new array just with things that match our filter. So now this array, called array filter, will be an array of whatever equals to random number. So basically now all we have to do is check if this array filter dot length is equal to 2. Okay, because if it's equal to 2, then that means we already have filter. Okay, so basically we're going to check if it's not. Okay, remember an exclamation point makes this not true. So if array.filter.length is not equal to 2, then we are going to gameArray.push random number. Okay, so if this number isn't there twice already, then we're going to add it to our array. And if not, then nothing happens. So let's run our code again. Okay, and here let's console.log our array, just to see what's going on there and make sure that everything's working. So let's run that, and we see that our array only has 5. Okay, sometimes it has 6, sometimes it has 5, sometimes it has 4, and this is basically because we're only running this 6 times, game size times, and this should actually not be dependent on I, but it actually should be for game array. And actually this is more like a while loop. So let's change this out to a while loop. So while game array is smaller than game size. Okay, and let's check that out now. Okay, so we're only getting 2 in each array. So let's try and figure out why that is happening. Take a look at the code. I wrote here just plain game array, but this should actually be game array.length, because game array can't really be compared to game size because one is an array and one is a number. So let's try running our code again, and perfect. Okay, so now we're getting 6 numbers, and we see that each time we have 2 sets of each number from 1 to 3. So great, so we have our game array, and now basically what we want to do is we want to use this game array to create our cards. So actually we're going to switch out this for loop here, and we're going to say game array, and we're going to use something called for each, and basically this executes a certain piece of code for each item in the array. Okay, and we need to close this off here at the end. And this takes, so for each, and we'll just say, we'll call this number. Okay, so for each number in the game array, we are going to execute this code, this function on each of those numbers. And what do we basically want to do? We want the inner HTML of the number to equal to that number. Okay, and basically now if we run this code, identifier number has already been declared. Okay, so let's change this. Let's call it num, just so we don't get confused here. Great. So now let's click at our cards, and we see that each of them has a number that's from our array. So we're making great progress. One more thing that we're going to do is we're going to give each card an ID based on the number that, based on what number card it is. And that's just so that we have a different ID for each card. So right here, we're just going to do card.setAttribute. And this attribute that we're setting is going to be ID. And we're just going to call it card. And then here we are going to add something. And this thing that we want to add here is going to be the index of the number in the game array. And so what we need to do here, because this for each function can also take a index argument. Okay, and now basically if we on the bottom here, let's console.log, and we'll be logging each card dot get attribute ID. Okay, and let's take a look at that. So we see basically each card has been given an ID from 0 to 5. And this is going to be important later on if we're going to want to be keeping track of these cards and changing them individually. So they should really each have their own individual ID. Okay, great. So now basically what we want to do is we want to add the game element, because now basically I can flip all the cards over at the same time, and that's no fun. So we really only want the player to be able to flip 2 cards simultaneously. Okay, and so we're going to need to add some more conditions into the event listener for click. Okay, so let's try and think of different situations. So if this is the first time that they are clicking on the card, then we always want to flip the card. So how are we going to keep track of if it's the first time? So let's declare another variable up here, and we're just going to call it flipped cards, and we're going to start it off at 0. Okay, let's call it flip card sum, just to keep it clear. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say, okay, if flipped card sum is equal to 0, okay, no cards have been flipped yet, then we're always going to flip that card over. Okay, and what we're also going to do is we are going to add 1 to flip card sum. Okay, and that means we have 1 card flipped over now. Okay, so let's put this in an else if we already have 1 card flipped over, okay, is bigger than 0, okay, or you know what, let's say equal 1, just so we don't hit any problems later on. If flipped card is equal to 1, then we are going to flip a card still, and we are going to add, and then what we want to do is basically flip all of our cards back to green. Okay, and we're going to want to do this not immediately, but shortly after the person flips the card. Okay, so for this we're going to use something called set timeout, and this set timeout takes a function, and it has a time. So let's give it 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. And basically what's going to happen is that when this part of the if statement is executing, okay, it's going to first flip the card to white, and then it's going to wait for 1 second and execute whatever is happening here in the set timeout. So in this set timeout function, what do we want to do? Okay, we actually want to flip all of our cards to green. So that means we're going to have to run through all of our cards using a for loop. So let I equal 0, and as long as I is smaller than game length, than game size, sorry, I plus plus, and each time that we run through, we are going to get a certain card. So card dot get, sorry, we're actually going to be getting an element by ID. So it's going to be document dot body dot get element by ID. Sorry, this is not going to be in body. This is just going to be in document. Okay, dot get element by ID. And the ID is going to be card plus I. Okay, because remember we named our cards here 0, 1, 2, 3. So basically it's going to be card 0, card. And then for each one of these, we're going to change the style of the background color, and it's just going to be green. Okay, so let's test out our code and see what happens here. So everything is green, great. Flipped one over, flipped another one over, and nothing is happening. Okay, so let's take a look at this, and we're basically going to console.log flipped card sum, just to see what's happening over here. And let's get rid of some of our other consoles just so that we can see clearly here. Where else do we have console? Console.log random number. Okay, let's try running our code again. 0, 1. Okay, document.getElement by ID is not a function. Okay, so let's take a look at that and where we made a mistake. Probably a typo. Let's retype this. Excellent. Okay, and let's try that again. Boom. Okay, so basically we saw that this was a 3 and a 2. We flipped over the cards. Excellent. So now let's just try more cards. No. Okay. No. Okay, when we try adding another card, it basically flips all the cards back over. So we can't really flip any more cards when we're checking 2 cards. And basically what we want to do now is see if we're finding a match. Okay, so if this is 3 and 3, then we want to say, yay, it's a match. Okay, so basically what we want to do is we want to get the number that's inside the card and keep track of it for when we flip another card. And the way we're going to be doing that is by using the inner HTML. So here we're going to add another variable, and we're going to call it flipped card. Okay, and we're going to just start it off with nothing here. Okay, and this is basically going to keep track of which card is currently the flipped one. And okay, so if we're flipping a card here when it's equal 0, then flipped card is going to be equal to card dot, okay, children, because basically we want to go into the H1 that we have within the card, and then it's going to be inner HTML. Okay, and for children, let's just use 0 because this will basically return an array of all the children. There is only one child here, but just so we can avoid some bugs, let's use child 0. And then when we flip another card, basically what we're going to want to do is see if card dot children 0 dot inner HTML is equal to flipped card. Okay, and if this is true, okay, then we console.log it's a match. Okay, and let's see what happens now with our code. So we flip 2 cards, not a match. 2 cards, not a match. 2 and 2. Uh-oh, okay, we've been getting a bit of it's a match here even when it's not a match. So let's take a look at that again. 3, 1, 3, 2, it's a match. Okay, so there's a problem there. And basically our problem is that we're not really changing flipped card when we get a wrong match. Okay, so if it's a wrong match, so let's say else here. Okay, if it's not a match, then let's make flipped card equal to nothing. Okay, and let's try running that code again. Okay, so we have 3 and 1, not a match, excellent. 3 and 1, not a match. 3 and 3, and it is not a match. So let's try and figure out what's going on here. So here, in addition to, let's also console.log flipped card. Okay, and let's try running our code. Okay, flipped card is nothing. And we run 3, flipped card is still nothing. Okay, and the problem is that what's happening is that our flipped cards sum, okay, is never really going back to 0. Okay, you can see here. Okay, we start at 0, but our flipped card sum is never really going back to 0. So basically what we want to do, right, if we flipped the cards back over, then let's also, okay, not inside the for loop because we only want to do this once, but right here inside of the timeout, let's set flipped card sum to 0. Okay, because that makes sense because we flipped all the cards back over, so it's equal to 0. Let's try running our code again. 1, 1, it's a match. Okay, that's correct. 1, 2, nothing happens there. 2, 2, it's a match. 3, 3, it's a match. Okay, great. So our code is basically working. We can tell when somebody has a match. We can tell when somebody doesn't have a match. And basically what we're going to want to do now is if the cards are a match, then we don't want to flip them back over. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to take this this code for the set timeout, and we're going to put it inside the case where it's not a match. Okay, and let's just format document so our code is a little more organized. And let's take this and let's move this to the top because this is going to happen no matter what. So just to make it a little more organized. Excellent. Now let's try running our code. Okay, 3, 1, not a match. 2, 1, not a match. 1, 1, it's a match. Excellent. So both of them stay unflipped. Now we can continue trying. 2, 2, and we see that everything got flipped over. And that's because our flipped card sum Okay, that's only here in the case where we don't have a match. So we're going to want to zero this out no matter what. So let's do that right over here. And let's try running our code again. 3, 2, not a match. 1, 2, not a match. 2, 2, it's a match. I click another card, everything is stable. 1, 3, and everything flips over. So in order to avoid situations like that, we're going to need to do some much more complex coding that I'm not going to go into now to keep a record of which cards are flipped and kind of add a certain status to each card. We can do that by adding something to the ID or adding a class or something like that, or keeping an array that keeps track of all the card IDs. There are different ways to solve this. For now, we have a pretty good game, and it's even a more challenging game because you actually have to re-find your matches and keep track of them all before you can solve the game. But in under an hour, we made a very simple JavaScript, pure JavaScript match game. If you like this game and you like this tutorial, please subscribe, please like this video, and feel free to comment below if you want to see how to do other things using only JavaScript. Use your imagination and we'll do it. So I hope to see you next time.